Is Marvel in trouble? Yes and no. Bad news is they've definitely hit a rough patch, but the good news is that it's entirely of their own making, which means they can fix it. So today we're going to first get a clear picture of the precarious position in which Marvel currently finds themselves and how they got there, and then discuss how they can get out of there. Now, if you rewind just about a year, Marvel was standing on its strongest foundation yet. Captain America the Winter Soldier was met with tremendous praise, perhaps the most respected comic book film since The Dark Knight. Sure, Marvel did falter at Comic-Con with no real announcements, plus there was the rumor that it was all Joaquin Phoenix's fault for refusing to sign on for the role of Doctor Strange in time for the convention. He never did sign on and was actually the first sign of Marvel's growing problems with talent, but more on that in a moment. The stars started to align right after Comic-Con when Guardians of the Galaxy hit theaters and was a massive surprise hit, not only launching a slew of new characters for Marvel and successfully introducing the Marvel Cosmic branch of the MCU, which of course plays into the Infinity War storyline that Marvel has been building towards since the first Thor and Captain America, but also made Chris Pratt a movie star overnight. Plus, Marvel seemed like one big happy family, with Joss Whedon having recommended James Gunn for the gig. Then, a few months after that, Marvel masterfully pulled off a solo press event. The mystery invitations went out the Friday before, causing the press and fans alike to speculate all weekend as to the nature of the event, much like Apple's product announcements. Apple and Disney, by the way, have a close relationship, as Steve Jobs became the Mouse House's largest single shareholder after they acquired Pixar, and he even sat on the company's board of directors. That October 2014 event, which is now practically a Hollywood legend, announced Marvel's entire Phase 3, with movies scheduled all the way through 2018. It was not only an ambitious lineup, promising to delve deep into Marvel Cosmic and deliver a two-part Avengers film, that Infinity War, but it also finally gave fans what they've been demanding for some time at that point: Black Panther and Captain Marvel solo movies. Yes, Marvel was now at an all-time high, with the hotly anticipated Avengers Age of Ultron sparkling on the horizon. And while they'd not officially released that trailer at Comic-Con, they'd done so soon after with a fantastic response from fans. Yet ironically, like the Joaquin Phoenix debacle, Age of Ultron was to become yet another crack in that rock-solid foundation. Another crack? Well, right before Avengers Age of Ultron hit theaters, Marvel itself released its first Netflix show, Daredevil. Seemingly coming out of nowhere, it was an instant hit, with the streaming service almost immediately greenlighting a second season for 2016, which, by the way, totally flew in the face of the carefully laid plans first announced by Marvel and Netflix to set up the Defenders. But what really made Daredevil dangerous for Marvel Studios is that it was willing to go where the movies would not, where Kevin Feige will not allow them to go: a dark place. Yet the trailers for Avengers Age of Ultron had set up that sequel as a film that would be dark and would have consequences. So with those trailers and a darker Daredevil fresh in fans' minds, it almost seemed like a step backwards when Avengers Age of Ultron hit theaters. This is actually reminiscent of Iron Man 3, where the trailers also promised a darker film with a powerful villain, only to deliver more jokes and a villain who was literally a joke. Perhaps if Marvel had listened to the disappointment of its core fan base with that film, they could have avoided making the exact same mistake with Age of Ultron. Now, besides disappointing a large percentage of their viewers with the film itself, a cloud of more general negativity seemed to be ushered in as well. Joss Whedon made it clear he hadn't enjoyed working on the sequel with Marvel, saying they'd threatened to cut his Hawkeye storyline if he didn't help set up future films, and was glad to be leaving the studio. What's more, he reopened old wounds by reiterating his opinion that Edgar Wright's Ant-Man script, which Marvel wasn't making, was the best Marvel script he'd ever read. But Whedon was having problems himself. Not only was some fans upset about Age of Ultron in general, but in the origin changes he made for Black Widow. Speaking of Black Widow, many fans were also upset about her being left out of much of the film's merchandising, even being replaced by Captain America in the toy version of one of her action sequences. Mark Ruffalo even weighed in, chastising Marvel over Twitter, as "Where's Natasha" became a popular hashtag. Then, right before Comic-Con this year, celebrated Selma director Ava DuVernay announced she was walking away from Black Panther, something fans had felt was a done deal. To make matters worse, she said she was passing on the film over creative differences, which seemed to lend credibility to Whedon and Wright's accusations. And let's not forget that Marvel's two crowd-pleaser films, Black Panther and Captain Marvel, had already been pushed back due to Feige's obsession with adding Spider-Man to the MCU, a character who was supposed to be a major part of Civil War, but now, due to a delay over a disagreement with Sony over casting, will only have a cameo. Furthermore, there are rumors that Civil War will be an adaptation of the famous comic in name only, with little regard for the source material. Are we to expect yet another repeat of the Mandarin debacle or the Age of Ultron debacle, as again Feige has vowed the MCU will never go dark? Back to Comic-Con, Marvel decided not to participate this year, instead holding out for the D23 Expo in August, which is of course a company event. Yet in doing so, they allowed the competition to make headlines, and boy did they make headlines, with Marvel not being a part of the conversation at all. They allowed fans to see a comic book movie landscape that did not feature Marvel, and fans did not find that landscape lacking. Then finally, the long-troubled Ant-Man just hit theaters and was Marvel's lowest debut since The Incredible Hulk, as if they'd suddenly gone back to square one. Man, oh man, as I said, this is a precarious position indeed, and here's what Marvel can do to fix it. First off, Marvel can't afford to buy into their own hype. Maybe they can't turn just any character into a hit, and maybe their formula isn't so foolproof after all. And did Marvel make Chris Pratt a movie star, or simply get to him first? After all, his abs did debut in Zero Dark 30, and Jurassic World's stunning success seems to prove he's the secret ingredient and not Marvel. Plus, Marvel put abs on Paul Rudd and didn't get the same results. I'm not saying Marvel shouldn't take chances, but perhaps they do need to look before they leap and build in some safety nets just in case. Second, Marvel needs to learn to play defense. I know, it's something they're not used to having to do because for so long they didn't need to. But the other studios, especially Warner Brothers and Fox, seem to finally be getting the hang of this whole comic book movie thing, and competition is getting fierce fast. Just look at what happened to Disney Animation when they took their dominance for granted. Yes, Marvel can no longer afford to skip Comic-Con. Third, Marvel needs to go dark. That doesn't mean they have to lose all their humor and bright colors, which bring in the lucrative family market, and they don't even have to go Daredevil dark. But there need to be greater and more permanent consequences for characters' actions, and not everything needs to be neatly resolved in a single film, especially when Marvel has pioneered the interconnected cinematic universe. And I'm also talking about villains here. Marvel must fix their villain problem, which at this point has moved beyond being a joke. It's embarrassing. Warner Brothers and DC have an entire villain film hitting theaters next year, and the special footage they showed only at Comic-Con was so hot they were forced to release it to the public, which then caught on like wildfire, surpassing the view count of the studio's own Batman v Superman trailer, which had been officially released during the convention in mere days. In contrast, Marvel has been building up Thanos since the first Avengers movie, yet he was a forgettable part of Guardians of the Galaxy, and audiences were disappointed that he was the end credits scene for Age of Ultron. Uh-oh! Ultron was a small step in the right direction, yet by the end of the movie, Vision seemed the far more disturbing threat. Will that creepiness be allowed to come to fruition, or be left frustratingly undeveloped, or even worse, outrightly ignored? Fourth, Marvel can no longer afford to ignore its lack of representation in the MCU, especially with the very diverse DC cinematic universe about to erupt. Marvel can't keep sidelining, benching, or delaying its female and non-white characters, something they do seem to be on the verge of fixing with the new Avengers lineup. And the sooner the better, as when audiences who feel underrepresented and underappreciated realize that angry tweets and flash mobs aren't working, they might start not buying movie tickets to make themselves heard. And has that already begun with Ant-Man? Finally, the fifth thing Marvel needs to do is extend an olive branch to top talent. The Marvel formula is important, but it shouldn't be so set in stone that only people with nothing to lose are willing to work with it. This circles back to not believing their own hype, with the addendum that Marvel also shouldn't believe no one else has anything worthy of adding to their characters. Filmmaking is a team business, and some awfully strong players are actually walking away from what's supposed to be the biggest team in Hollywood, and that's never a good sign. So what are your thoughts on Marvel's current situation? How do you personally feel about the studio right now? And what advice would you give them? Be sure to write your thoughts down below. I'm Grace Randolph, and this has been a Movie Bite. You can watch more right now.